Okay, why don't we get started? First of all, welcome everybody to the Kennedy School if you're new, and to the Mossavar Rahmani Center for Business and Government open house. I have to confess, this is a first. The first time we've ever done a Zoom open house in the history of the Mossavar Rahmani Center for Business and Government or the history of the Kennedy School. It's not what any of us expected. And I hope that you have patience as we are learning how to use Zoom and all the features of Zoom to make this as enjoyable an experience as possible. I'm John Haig. I am the co-director of the Mossavar Rahmani Center for Business and Government, but I also teach at the Kennedy School and at the Business School. I teach 3 courses. One is the joint degree seminar for the students who are in the joint degree with the business school when they're in their second year. I teach the policy analysis exercise seminar for the MPPs when they're in the business and government area when they're in their second year. And I teach a module on corporate citizenship and whether corporations can actually help solve public problems. But perhaps most importantly to many of you, I am an MPP 1982 myself. So I've been where you sit. But I also was in the private sector for many years. I was president of AT&T's international operations and senior vice president for emerging initiatives at AT&T Wireless. And then we got acquired and I left and came to the Kennedy School in 2005 as the executive dean and stepped down from that role a couple years ago. We have a lot to cover today. And so I'm going to get started with some slides here in a second. There are a couple of things that I want to mention. One is Scott Leland is with us, and just as background for you, Scott is the executive director of the center, and he too is an MPP grad, 1992. And so this, we're going to cover, I'm going to share my screen, be patient with me, because I have a few slides to go through. We have a lot of faculty who have recorded videos to describe their programs and activities to you. And we will run through those, and at the end we'll leave some time for Q&A. Also, if you have a question as we're going through the slides or the discussions, you can type it in, and Victoria Groves, who works in the center as well and does a lot of public relations and communications, will be tracking those, and at the end she will bring those questions forward to us so we can answer them. So let's see if we can share the screen. And hopefully all of you see the screen at this point. As you can see, there are a large number of people affiliated with the center. And in the center, you see myself, but you also see Larry Summers in the middle. Larry is the director of the center, former secretary of the Treasury, and president of Harvard. The one thing I would point out is that I have the same tie on in that picture that I have on now. This is the first time I have put a tie on in 5 months, so this is a major kind of cultural shift for me personally. But I think we're all adjusting to this new environment. Let me, couple things. First of all, what is the purpose of the center? It is, as stated here, to create public value at the intersection of business and government. And that is about as broad a definition of a charter as you could imagine, because it's very difficult to imagine too many problems that are societal problems that don't require some interaction, some relationship, some collaboration between business and government. And the pandemic exacerbates that even more so today, as does some of the issues around diversity and inclusion and structural racism that need to be addressed. And there is a role for business and government, and how those two interact is really what the focus of the center is about. We have 4 broad areas of research, and these are the 4 areas. One is achieving shared sustainable prosperity, and there are many programs within each of these buckets, over a dozen programs within the center. For example, the growth policy program, and as you can imagine, Larry Summers is heavily involved in that aspect, and in particular thinking about things like structural stagnation in the economy and on a global basis. We have the sustainability science with Bill Clark, who you'll hear from later. We have education with Dick Light. We have a healthcare program with Amitabh Chandra. that really is looking at healthcare policy and economics of healthcare, and then a variety of others. We have a program in regulation, and in particular, we've had a long history of energy, environment, and technology related research with Rob Stavens, Joe Aldi, Bill Hogan, and many of them will have short videos for you to look at as well. We've expanded a bit to take a slightly more global perspective, focused on China, Asia, and the global economic system. And then lastly, exploring capitalism and the role of the corporation. So those are the four big buckets. And there are a lot of activities in each of those buckets. But probably what's most important to most of you as students is really around what's in it for you, to be blunt about it. And the first is there's a lot of course teaching that's done by affiliated faculty of the center, and they oftentimes have you as course assistants. That's managed through outside of the center structure, but the linkages to the center can become important opportunities. The second is our research assistant opportunities. We tried to fund some over the summer for faculty, so some of you may have worked with those faculty, and we're going to try to continue some of that through the year. We have awards, prizes, and research grants that we provide to students as well. I'm going to turn it over. We have a ton of seminars and events, and we really like for you to attend those. They're open. We anticipate this year that we will be remote, doing them online, but there's some benefits to that because the transactions cost of watching them are not that great. You can really just engage fairly simply through a Zoom. Victoria Groves works, as I mentioned, on the public relations and communications aspects of the center. Victoria, do you want to just give a little bit of background on the seminars and events?
Sure. So all of our events obviously are going to be virtual this semester at least, and they can be found on our website at mrcbg.org, and they're also all cross-posted on the Kennedy School events page as well. We send out an e-blast every Monday morning that contains the events for that week and also recent news and research from our faculty affiliates and our fellows. The sign up is on our website, but I'm going to put it in the chat so that folks can just link through to it if they'd like to get that on Mondays. If you miss one of our events, we post many of them, including this one, in case any of your friends or colleagues weren't able to attend today. We post them on YouTube. You can get that handle as well as our Facebook and our Twitter handle on our website. And if there are any specific questions down the road and you really don't know who to reach out to get in touch, I can put the general M-RCBG mailbox email in the chat as well, and we can route those questions to the right person.
Terrific. Susan Gill works closely with our senior fellows and with Scott and I on our senior fellows program. We have study groups, which are not for credit groups led mostly by our senior fellows. Susan, you want to just talk a little bit about the study groups and how they work?
Sure. The M-RCBG Senior Fellows are a really great resource and a really important part of the center. They're people who come to the center to work on a research project. They have usually at least 20 years experience in their field, and they're highly accomplished people. So throughout the year, they hold study groups. They're kind of one-off seminars and discussion groups for students to come to. So keep an eye out on our website, and as well as on the HKS Daily and the weekly e-blast that Victoria mentioned, and you'll find listings for those. So register and please come to those. Also, in a couple of weeks, we'll be holding a speed networking event, which is an opportunity for you to sit down virtually in small groups with our senior fellows and get to talk to them about your interests and theirs. Perhaps you'll end up being their RA or going to their study groups. So keep an eye out for both of those. Register and join us. Thanks. Oh, and I should mention the date. It's September 18th, which is a Friday. It's at 10:30 to noon for the speed networking event. So please keep an eye out for that. Thanks.
Terrific, Susan. One of the last things we have is the B&G Professional Interest Council. We have working paper series. We can talk about that later if people have questions, but we have what is called the Business and Government PIC, Professional Interest Council. Scott, you want to touch base on that a little bit?
Yes, very happy to. Thank you. We have actually a question that came in on the Q&A, and it's from somebody who says, to engage with a center in one of the 4 areas, do I need to wait for an RA opportunity to come up, or is there any other way to engage proactively as well? And that's a perfect segue into the Business and Government Professional Interest Council. This is the student-run group that engages directly with our center. Primarily, one of the main focus areas that they're involved with is inviting speakers to various events that they will organize. So if you are particularly interested, for example, in fintech or impact investing or public-private partnerships, and there's a speaker that you want to invite at the school, the way that it's set up is you actually have to be part of a student group in order to do that. And the group at the Business and Government would be a great way for you to become involved with the center, to invite those speakers. There are a number of leadership positions which are open and available, and you can learn about those and how to apply. If you go to our website, one of the menu items is students, and the very first item under that is more information on the Business and Government PIC. So I hope you'll consider applying for a leadership position or at least to become involved so that you can have more networking opportunities and also help reach out and create new events for other students as well.
Thanks, Scott, Victoria, Susan. All right, Scott, am I back on the screen? I just put up a slide. Hopefully everybody sees it. But I'll talk you through it. These are our senior fellows, and Susan alluded to this, but they're a terrific group of people, highly accomplished. And as she said, most of them have anywhere from 20 to 25, maybe more years of experience. They're at a point where they would like to try to take what they've learned in the world of practice and consolidate some of that into thinking and thoughts about policy problems. And just to give you a few examples, and I'm not kind of highlighting anybody in particular, but if you look, for example, Jeff Fuhrer is working on monetary policy, and Jeff has been at the Federal Reserve here in Boston as a PhD economist for many, many years, and just retired last spring. George Julio Rocca deals with financial crisis issues. He was a leading PhD economist in Greece to help deal with the Greek crisis. Somebody described him to me as the individual who was the most thoughtful, most rational in trying to deal with the Greek debt crisis. You've got Megan Green working on inequality issues, in particular economic inequality issues. Sajid Javid just joined us as a senior fellow, and he has just recently stepped down as a Chancellor of the Exchequer for Britain. That's the equivalent of being the Secretary of the Treasury, very senior position. And he wants to look at various COVID type issues where you have high impact, low probability events, and that'll be the nature of his work. I could go through many more of the people on this list. There are people working on energy policy like Christoph Ruhl. Ioana Petrescu was the finance minister of Romania and is a PhD in economics from Harvard, and is now here working on kind of political economy in developing countries. Terrific. Wake Smith working on global climate change, and in particular, some of the technologies to try to address that. So it's just a tremendous group of senior fellows. And one of the things we do as a center is we fund research assistance for them. So I would encourage you to check our website, because we try to post descriptions of the work that the senior fellows are doing. And it's a terrific opportunity to get a chance to do some in-depth work and to network with people. For example, Eric Salama ran one of the largest public relations firms in the world at one point, and his project is on data privacy, and almost thinking about data privacy as the next human right. So anyhow, keep an eye out for all of those opportunities. Tremendous opportunity for all of you. With that, I'm going to switch it over to Scott. Scott has a series of videos from our various affiliated faculty describing their programs and their research. And then we will come back at the end and give you the opportunity to ask more questions if you have them. Scott, I'm going to quit sharing my screen, and I think it is all yours.
Great, thank you, John. So as John mentioned, we have actually about a dozen videos from our affiliated faculty. We're going to start with Larry Summers, who's the director of the Center for Business and Government, former president of Harvard University, and has had a number of positions within government. Here's his video.
Welcome to a year unlike any other at the Center for Business and Government. Think about it. What we're about is business and government, how they interact, the challenges that face both of them, the ways in which they cooperate, the ways in which they oppose each other. We're in a year that's going to be defined by coronavirus, by the COVID challenge. And it is quintessentially a business and government issue. Who is going to make the tests? How are the tests going to be distributed? Who is going to establish the framework in which testing does or does not take place? That's actually a relatively easy problem compared to the problem of finding a vaccine, distributing a vaccine, deciding how a vaccine is going to be allocated. These are the most vivid, but hardly the only issues bringing together business and government. We've long maintained active programs around the environment and global climate at the Center for Business and Government, around energy, particularly the production of electricity, around the broad management and regulation of the financial system. I myself have been preoccupied in recent years with the issue of secular stagnation, which has implications for every aspect of financial markets. We're concerned at the center both with domestic American issues, with issues that are domestic issues everywhere, like maintaining health, and with issues that are by their very essence global, like climate change. Normally, I wouldn't be delivering these remarks via a recording. We would all be sipping drinks and enjoying cheese and crackers. It's going to be a while before we have in-person interactions, but I think we have an opportunity to see the future this year as we're all forced to interact virtually. I know I've put more effort into renewing and refurbishing my course this year than in the last 5 because of that challenge. And I see the distance at which we're all going to have to operate as being an opportunity as much as a challenge. I hope you'll feel that way. We will try to innovate in terms of ways of bringing people together and promoting interaction. We will be grateful for any thoughts and advice you have. I know my co-director, John Haig, executive director, Scott Leland, and all the staff at the center are here to make your experience working and thinking and being involved with business and government issues as exciting as possible. Thank you very much.
Next up is Jason Furman, who is the Professor of Practice of Economic Policy.
Hi, I'm Jason Furman, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know all of you over the course of this year. I do research and policy work on a wide range of economic policy topics. The topic that has most seized me and dominated my work for the last 6 months has been the COVID crisis and the effect it's having on our economy. I came out with an economic plan to deal with it in early March, had some influence on what Congress ultimately did in the United States, and I'm continuing to both work with policymakers, put out ideas, and do talks to help further the understanding. In addition, I do research in a number of different areas, but over the next year, we'll be doing a lot on inequality, how it's measured, its relationship to economic growth, and then also continuing a combination of research and policy work on the decline of competition, the rise of monopolies, and in particular, what to do about digital competition. I chaired a report for the UK government. They're implementing my recommendations on that topic right now, and I'm keen to see the United States follow suit. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you around, I guess mostly on Zoom.
And next up is Joe Aldi, Professor of Practice of Public Policy, and also the Director of the Center's Program on Regulatory Policy.
Aldi, Professor of the Practice of Public Policy here at the Harvard Kennedy School and the Faculty Chair of the Regulatory Policy Program at the Mossavar Rahmani Center for Business and Government. I've been on the faculty at HKS now for 10 years, and I've twice worked in the federal government at the White House and at the Council of Economic Advisors. At HKS, I teach 2 courses in the spring, our second semester economics course for MPP 1s, Resources, Incentives, and Choices. And I teach an elective, API 165, on energy and environmental economics and policy. And in the fall, I joined my colleague Rebecca Henderson at HBS to do a session in our capstone MBA MPP course for the 3rd-year students, where we lead a session on energy and climate change, business, and policy. My research here focuses on energy policy, climate change policy, and regulatory policy. Some of my recent work is focused on how we could have a climate-oriented investment as a part of a post-COVID economic recovery, thinking about how we could design a carbon tax to drive down emissions in the United States, how we can think about the competitiveness impacts of pricing carbon in US manufacturing, as well as how we design more effective international climate agreements. I've also been doing work in regulatory policy, trying to understand how to institutionalize more effective evaluations of our regulations, and to think through what are the sort of the best practices in the conduct of benefit cost analysis of regulatory agencies, including recently an assessment of the Clean Air Act, which turns 50 this year. I also lead 2 seminar series here at HKS, a regulatory policy seminar and the energy policy seminar. We meet at noon on Thursdays for the regulatory policy seminar, and this semester we'll host several of our colleagues at Harvard who have books out on regulatory policy, as well as the head of regulation for Google and the former chair of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. In the energy policy seminar, we meet at noon on Mondays. We'll host an array of academics, economists, political scientists, a physicist, even an engineer, whose work focuses on energy and climate policy, but also people who work for key stakeholders, including the chief economist of BP and the chief economist of the Environmental Defense Fund. For those of you new to Harvard, welcome. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. It's without a doubt going to be a very unusual year. We want to do everything possible to make the most of it. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to follow up by email, by phone, or by Zoom. If you'd like to attend our seminars, send me an email at joseph_aldi@hks.harvard.edu, and we'll get you on the email list for the regulatory policy seminar or the energy policy seminar. You can also go to my website to sign up for my weekly office hours. I'll be doing those by Zoom. You can find me at scholar.harvard.edu/Jaldi. And I'd be happy to discuss how you think about your courses, your extracurricular efforts, what you can do here at Harvard and at the Kennedy School to help contribute to our mission of making the world a better place. Welcome.
Next up is Linda Bilmes, the Daniel Patrick Moynihan Senior Lecturer in Public Policy.
And greetings to the Kennedy School students and to my friends and colleagues at the Mrcbg Ramani Center for Business and Government. I'm Linda Bilmes, and this fall I'm teaching MLD 411M, which is a module starting on October 20th. This is the Introduction to Budgeting and Financial Management, and we cover basic skills such as cost accounting, variance analysis, revenue forecasting, the balanced scorecard, social equity budgeting, and capital budgeting, and basic tools for evaluating budgets and revenue structures. It's a short module, so it's 6 weeks, kind of boot camp. I'll be teaching it. I'm in the process of modifying it for the online world, but I'll be teaching it with a combination of tutorials, workshops, and online exercises. The class meets on Tuesdays at 10:30 in the morning for a sort of general plenary session, and we have 2 sets of workshops. You can choose the A or the B, either at 10:30 in the morning or 4:30 in the afternoon on Thursdays, which will be team-based workshops to go through skills. This course is also a prerequisite, one of the prerequisites for my field lab course, which is in the spring, MLD 412, which I hope will be at least partially in person, and fingers crossed we'll have as at least a hybrid. And this is a really fantastic field lab in which we work with communities throughout Massachusetts and the country. For example, we work with the MBTA, we work with Massport, we work with small businesses, and we work on a lot of conservation and environmental projects. We work on, we will have a huge amount of very complex projects this spring related to the economic fallout of the pandemic and communities that are struggling to get back on their feet and to figuring out the fallout and consequences around housing, transportation, and other issues that require money. So overall, my interest is on how resources are allocated. I have done work in my career on war costs, on veterans costs, on issues related to the national parks and conservation, as well as to research on the public service and state and local budgets and government, which are some of my main interests. And I will be very happy to see some of you and meet some of you, and hopefully have some of you in my classes in this coming year.
Next up is Bill Clark, Harvey Brooks Professor of International Science, Public Policy, and Human Development. And he is also the director of the Center's Sustainability Science Program.
Hi, my name is Bill Clark. I'm on the faculty here at the Kennedy School. My background is training as an ecologist, but I now study and teach sustainable development here at Harvard. Sustainable development, as I see it, is about treating seriously humanity's reliance on a functioning planet for its long-term prosperity, about finding out ways you can increase human well-being in the here and now without undermining the ability of people elsewhere or in future generations to pursue their own well-being. My research on that, I've just finished with my colleague Alicia Harley, a big review of the state of the field. We're expanding that into a monograph for training people, practitioners and scholars in what science has to say about sustainable development. We're right now running here on campus a program on operational capacities for advancing sustainable development, in which we're working from snowballed nominations about best practices in the field, documenting those, and then comparing them back to see what academics can learn from practitioners, and vice versa, what the practitioners might learn from the scientists. In terms of service, two big activities in which I'm in need of student collaborators. One is at the Kennedy School. I serve as co-chair of the Dean's Sustainability Leadership Council, which plots everything from our solar collectors to our reductions of food waste and plastics initiative. And then for Harvard University, I co-chair the group of the Presidential Committee on Sustainability that is crafting Harvard's second sustainability plan to carry us forward over the next 5 years. My teaching is, I teach a course in sustainable development, but I teach it in the college, not here at the Kennedy School. I, however, am in perpetual need of teaching fellows for that course. So those of you who are interested in the subject and have some substantial practitioner or scholarly background in it and would like to be a teaching fellow in the spring, let me know. You can find me at the Kennedy School or online at least, and I'd be delighted to follow up this conversation with any of you. Thanks very much.
Next up is Professor Rob Stavins. Hang on just a sec. He's the A.J. Meyer Professor of Energy and Economic Development, and he directs 2 different programs at the Center on Environmental Policy.
So climate change in the years ahead, particularly after the year 2050 and beyond, will possibly, and indeed likely now, we believe, result in very significant changes, not only in temperature, but more importantly in precipitation patterns. That will be particularly important for countries that are highly dependent upon agriculture. And that, of course, means developing countries who, by definition, get a larger share of their gross domestic product from agriculture. So the Harvard Project on Climate Agreements is an international effort bringing together scholars, people from business, and people from NGOs from around the world, from 40 countries, working together in order to help design and identify the key design elements of a future climate agreement that makes sense in terms of being scientifically sound, economically sensible, and therefore politically pragmatic. Well, several years ago, I was boarding a plane to go to the annual climate conference, and that year was in Bali in Indonesia. And I boarded the plane early, so I was able to see the others as they came on board. And it was essentially a set of negotiators from the United States, from Germany, from the Netherlands, from countries all over the world. And one after another, we saw them boarding with a copy of our book in their hands. And not only a copy of the book, but lots of little yellow noted slips throughout where they were reading. That showed me, as I think it's shown everyone, that the Harvard Project on Climate Agreements and the products we've produced, our books, our working papers, our meetings, our conferences, are having a significant effect in terms of the thinking of the negotiators.
Next up is Jane Nelson, who's a lecturer in public policy at the Kennedy School and also the director of our Corporate Responsibility Initiative.
I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone and very much look forward to meeting many of you either virtually or in person during the academic year. And my name is Jane Nelson and I direct our Corporate Responsibility Initiative, CRI, here at the Kennedy School. And our initiative focuses on 3 main areas of the role of the private sector, which inform all of our research and our student engagement and our public outreach. First, we look at the corporate responsibility to respect human rights and how companies are implementing the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights throughout their operations and their value chains. Secondly, we look at the role of business as a partner in working with governments and civil society and other organizations to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to implement the Paris Climate Agreement, with a very strong focus on what companies are doing through their core business activities, their value chains, but also through community investment and their engagement in policy dialogue and advocacy. And then thirdly, over the last 6 months, we've been working with a global online platform called Business Fights Poverty and with a group of companies, nonprofit organizations, and governments to focus in on what companies are doing to support the most vulnerable people who have had such devastating impacts on their lives and their livelihoods and their learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there we've been looking very much again at how business, through their core business, their community investment philanthropy, through policy advocacy, can support and help to protect lives and health and safety of people, as well as support livelihoods and learning during both the very difficult time that we're all in, but also looking longer term at a more inclusive and sustainable recovery. And in all three of those areas, our focus is very much on how companies are working in partnership with others. So in partnership with other companies, in partnership with civil society organizations, in partnership with governments and intergovernmental organizations. And really sort of what are some of the different governance models that could both help to mobilize resources, but also to ensure that corporate engagement is transparent and accountable. And so I think just in summary, I'd sort of like to say that in all three of these areas, respecting human rights, achieving global goals and sustainable development and addressing climate change, and thirdly, in responding to and recovering and helping people to respond to and recover from the pandemic and other systemic risks, our focus is very much on, first and foremost, how business can be more transparent, accountable, and responsible in its impact on people and the planet in a way that is still profitable. And then secondly, how business can create shared value and mobilize all its capabilities, technologies, products, services, business models, and financing to try and deliver solutions. So I personally feel that the role of the private sector, both some of the challenges associated with that role and the growing discourse around the concept of stakeholder capitalism, and some of the very positive contributions that business makes, is arguably more important than it's ever been. So during your time here at the Kennedy School, I hope you will at a minimum reflect on the role of business and how companies can be both more transparent and accountable, as well as how we can mobilize and work with business to mobilize their resources. And hopefully, some of you will want to dig into it in more depth. But regardless of the direction your time here takes you, I hope it'll be a very personal and personally and professionally fulfilling time, and wonderful to have you as part of the both Kennedy School and Center for Business and Government community. Thank you.
Next up is Roger Porter. He's the IBM Professor of Business and Government, Director also of the Kansai Keizai Doyokai program at our center, which looks at Japan and Asia Pacific policy.
My name is Professor Roger Porter. I'm joined with many colleagues in welcoming you to the Mosavar Ramani Center for Business and Government. I'm a longtime faculty member here, and like many of you, looking forward to the coming academic year. This year, I will be teaching two courses, one in the fall, one in the spring. The course in the fall is entitled The American Presidency. It is a course about the U.S. political system from the vantage point of the president, and provides an opportunity for students to assess, among other things, how much power the president really has, the process by which we go about selecting and electing the president, how the president manages his part of the government, the executive branch, the way in which presidents go about making decisions on national security policy and on economic and domestic policy. The second part of the course looks at strategy and the question of how presidents manage the transition from the election coming into office, how they seek to shape the national agenda, and how they manage their relations with those elements of the political system that are outside of their control: the Congress, the courts, organized interest groups, the press, and the public. And the final section of the course deals with the question of how do we evaluate executives, including presidents, and exercise appropriate judgment. In the spring, I'll be teaching the business government relationship in the United States. This is the survey course in business and government for those who are concentrating in business and government in Kennedy School, and students from the business school and the law school and other places are also welcome. Like all survey courses, it begins by looking at the broad landscape of what's been the historical evolution, the relationship between government, business, and government in the United States, what it's like managing at the top of business, what it's like managing at the top of government, and the variety of ways in which business and government interact with one another. And we turn to the second section of the course, which deals with business and government and the quest for prosperity. We look at what are the elements of economic growth. We look at fiscal policy, tax policy, regulatory policy, research and development, education. In each of these, we seek to look at what is optimal policy. If you were in charge and could do whatever you wanted to do, what would that policy look like? And secondly, how do we explain the policies that we have? What are the forces that go into play in producing the kinds of policies that emerge in our political systems? The next part of the course looks at business, government, and the achievement of social objectives. And here we look at labor market policies, healthcare, environmental, and regulatory policies. And then the final section of the course deals with business, government, and the international economy. We look at the ways in which the United States is integrated with the rest of the world. We look at specific industries like the steel industry and the ways in which it is undergoing adjustment. We look at trade policies and the use of trade sanctions to try to achieve economic objectives. And we look at the future of the global trading system and what has happened and is happening to the WTO. So it's a broad survey course, and it provides lots of opportunities for students to learn across a broad spectrum of topics. I'm also working with a colleague on a volume that looks at state and local pensions and the growing challenge that they are experiencing and have been for the last couple of decades, and where this is heading and what can be done by state and local governments to deal with this, what we call the gathering storm. I'm looking forward very much to hopefully meeting large numbers of you, certainly virtually during the fall semester. We'll have to wait and see in the spring whether or not we're in person or not, but whether we are virtual or in person, I'm confident it'll be a great year. And as I say, I'm looking forward very much to meeting each of you.
Next up is Richard Cavanaugh. He's an adjunct lecturer in public policy.
My name is Dick Cavanaugh, and I have been teaching courses about entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, and business entrepreneurship for a couple of decades at the Kennedy School. I want to talk about the course that is going to happen this fall, which is called MLD 830, Entrepreneurship in the Business and Social Sectors. And the first thing I have to say for people who might be interested in it is that you have to be financially literate to be able to take this course, or else you'll just struggle and it won't be any fun at all. And financially literate means that either by dint of education or by dint of professional experience, you know the basics of how to create pro forma financial statements. If you are not financially literate, there are courses that you can take, but I think we really want folks who at least understand the language. So let me tell you about the course. This is a course, it's a seminar, and it's a course that involves 12 cases, half of them about business entrepreneurship and half of them about social entrepreneurship. The reason for the mix is that my belief is that there are more similarities than differences in these two forms of entrepreneurship. And in 6 of the cases, we have visitors who are featured in the cases who will actually tell us what really happened and how our analysis was either right or wrong. The course is going to meet 2 times a week on Mondays and Fridays at 3 p.m. And importantly, the class will divide up into 3 groups of 6 people who will create and present their own business plans for social enterprises or business enterprises that they're interested in pursuing. Oddly enough, sometimes these groups which are put together and pick topics out of the air wind up doing them. And sometimes they wind up winning Harvard competitions. So you learn a lot from your fellow students. Secondly, I try to bring some value to it. I've been present at the creation of 3 for-profit businesses. The most notable one being BlackRock, which is a very large asset manager where I currently sit on the board and chair the board. And then Ashoka and Echoing Green, which are not-for-profit institutions that fund and find social entrepreneurs. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. In this spring, I teach a workshop, which is very similar to the course I just described, except that students are those who are really committed to being entrepreneurs, and they work on their own business plan rather than group business plans. And I also teach a module with John Haig about corporate citizenship. And in some sense, I think I could say that I've been preparing for that for the last 20 years.
And next we're going to hear from Malcolm Sparrow, Professor of Practice of Public Management.
Hello, my name is Malcolm Sparrow. I'm delighted to join all of my colleagues in welcoming new crop of students to the Kennedy School. You will have the most fabulous time. I actually joined the faculty way back in 1988. So I've been here now 32 years, if my mathematics is correct. But before that, I was a police officer working in the British Police Service in Kent. And I came to the school in the first case as a mid-career student, 1985, and graduated in 1986, at which point the school decided that they thought I belonged here on the faculty. So when I came, it was obvious that I should work on police management and strategy, and there's plenty going on in that field at the moment. But I also started working with other regulators too. I worked with tax and environment and then occupational safety and customs. And before long, the subject that I have pursued for 30 years is the work of regulatory practice. So I work most of the time in executive education with practitioners, senior practitioners from a whole range of regulatory and law enforcement and security and intelligence organizations from all over the world. I'm very happy to be affiliated with the Center for Business and Government and the Regulatory Policy Program. I have one problem with them. It's called the Regulatory Policy Program, and my focus has always been regulatory practice because I believe that once the law is in place and once the policy has been set, there's still an awful lot of decisions that can be taken, and that regulatory practitioners inhabit the space between the state of the law as enacted and the quality of protections as delivered to the public and to society. So I made this point last year, I'll make it again, and I think that the program should be called the Program on Regulatory Policy and Practice. I'll make the same point next year if necessary. What that does mean is I'm very happy to meet with anyone that's a regulatory practitioner and to talk about your experience and the range of difficult choices that you have to make in these times. And again, welcome to the school.
Okay, we have 3 speakers that are left. The first being Mrcbg, lecturer in public policy.
I'm Mrcbg. I'm on the faculty at the Kennedy School, and I'm also a former senior fellow at the center. I want to start with a question, and the question is, in the past 48 hours, have you experienced a poor service delivery? You went for a license and there was a long line. You went to the grocery and there was a big long queue. Or maybe there was just a confusing process. My guess is that each and every one of us probably in the past couple of days have experienced that. I want to eliminate that experience for you, and I want our students, including yourselves, to do it. I teach a course on operations management in the fall, and our goal is to help you identify service failures, to diagnose them, to re-engineer them, and to implement them successfully. I also teach a course in the spring on supply chain management. It has become very timely in the COVID world, and I welcome you to explore that as well. And finally, a couple of years ago, I was bitten by the autonomous vehicles bug, and I now run the Autonomous Vehicles Policy Initiative here at the school. Since it's at least initially not likely that I'll meet you in the hallway, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be delighted to meet you and explore areas of mutual interest. Thanks and welcome.
Our second to last speaker for the open house is Dick Light. He has a joint appointment both at the Kennedy School and also the School of Education, and he's the director of the center's education policy program.
Hello, everyone. I am Richard Light, L-I-G-H-T. My colleagues and many of my students know me as Professor Dick Light. I'm a longtime professor at Harvard. I'm connected to both the Grad School of Education and, of course, the Kennedy School of Government, specifically at the Center for Business and Government, the Mrcbg. Let me just very briefly summarize the education activities that go on in M-RCBG, in this exciting piece of the Kennedy School of Government. We have in education a focus on higher education, and I'm going to give 3 very short examples of projects to illustrate what we do. One project has actually just been completed. We were asked by the leadership of about 6 different colleges and universities, not just Harvard, but Boston College, Smith, Dartmouth, the University of Richmond, and others, to organize a group of study group discussions for students to enrich their residential experience at a superb, strong college campus. Now, this is for undergraduates, not for graduate students like you who are watching me. But anyway, here at M-RCBG, a group of colleagues and I prepared it. Harvard instituted it last year. We've had now close to 1,000 undergraduates take this, and it's all a production of the Mrcbg Ramani Center for Business and Government. A second example, this is an ongoing project, is to pose the question at colleges and universities, especially stronger colleges and universities, what are the fastest growing group of undergraduates? Let me get right to the answer. It's first generation in their family to attend college in their family. Many campuses, especially strong ones like Ivy League schools and many others, are reaching out to attract these terrifically talented young undergraduates. Question, what can a campus do to help these wonderfully talented, but often who attended under-resourced high schools? What can the college do to help these young men and women succeed? That's a project we're working on right now, and there's actually going to be a book forthcoming next spring. Third and final example to wrap up is we have annual meetings of about 30 people, ranging from very strong faculty, future leaders of campuses. They're now young faculty, typically in their 30s. They're going to be future leaders of campuses, presidents, deans, provosts, and we pose questions such as what are challenges facing a rapidly changing landscape in American higher education. I'll stop there. I hope those 3 examples, one of a project that's been actually completed and very successful, and the other 2 underway right now as we speak. I hope that illustrates what MRCBG is doing with higher education. Thank you. Have a good day.
Our last speaker for the day is Richard Zeckhauser, professor of political economy. He's also the director, together with John Haig, of our Senior Fellows program. I'll just note that the video, the quality of the video in the first 40 seconds or so is not very good, but it does improve a little bit later.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Zeckhauser. I teach a course called Analytic Frameworks for Policy. It covers such areas as decision analysis, game theory, and behavioral decision. The basic purpose of the course is to understand how human beings and organizations behave and why, and to help you improve your own decision making. And then we look at the implications for policy across a wide variety of areas, frequently focusing on contemporary policy issues, such as Black Lives Matter, climate change, the election, the decline in the economy, and so forth. The idea is not to make policy prescriptions, but rather to see how the tools we use can illuminate those particular subjects. Given my orientation, which is predominantly conceptual, my research spreads across a variety of areas. Recent areas where I've been working include climate change, where I worry about a three-pronged strategy for dealing with climate change, thus not just a mitigation, which is controlling greenhouse gases, but adaptation, which is protecting various areas that are threatened, and amelioration, which would include things like geoengineering. I also work in finance. I'm currently engaged in research on how the way managers speak, what that implies about how their companies will perform and how their stocks are appreciated by the market. And we look at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and see how the stock market reacted and whether that was a sensible reaction. And most recently, we've been looking at the reactions to COVID. I've just turned in the manuscript with a jointly authored book called The Dragon and Eagle and the Private Sector, which is basically how China and the United States draw on the private sector to serve their public goals. And a final area is the operation of online markets. I recently published an article on the sharing economy, which would relate to such companies as Airbnb and Uber and Lyft. And we're now engaged in a study with a former KSG student who's become a professor at MIT on why internet sites would give out free opportunities to operate on their site when they also sell those opportunities. We're looking at things like dating sites and job sharing sites. So my basic approach to research is to say, I have some conceptual tools, and I'm very eager to look at a broad array of policy problems, which I frequently do with my colleagues and students. Thank you. I hope to see you in my course.
Okay, so with that, you have an overview of 13 of our different faculty members. There are, in fact, many more affiliated faculty with the center, but that gives you a flavor. So let me go ahead and turn it back over to John Haig, and we're also very interested if there are any questions that people have.
Thank you, Scott. Hopefully that gives you a pretty good flavor of what all of the faculty are doing that spoke. As Scott said, there are many faculty who are affiliated who were not able to provide us with recordings. So you should look through the affiliated faculty lists at the center, and if there are specific questions or opportunities, we're happy to answer those either now or through the website. Victoria, some questions I think have been coming in. Do you want to just read the questions or let us know what the questions are, and then we'll answer as best we can at this point?
Sure. So there's a question here from Godwin Chan, who's asking, I'm coming to HKS to learn more about public-private partnerships in infrastructure. How can I get involved?
Okay, it's a great question, and it's obviously a topic of relevance. And going back to not all faculty were able to provide recordings. One of the faculty affiliated with the center is Akash Deep, and I don't know if you know Akash or have met him, but Akash teaches finance, but he also teaches basically a lot of cases around infrastructure development, and many public-private partnerships engage around various infrastructure kind of questions. And he would be a great person for you to reach out to and have a conversation, and he can help bridge, I think, a bit some of the connections to other parts of the Kennedy School and potentially even more broadly across Harvard. The other thing I would say is if you really want to think about the PIC, the Professional Interest Council, in the past, we've had students set up within the PIC groups and focused on areas where they have interest. And we've had a public-private partnership subgroup within the PIC, which has invited, there's been a person who's led it and a group of people who meet regularly, students, and they've reached out and invited various speakers to come in to provide sessions. And that would be a natural way for you to get involved and be a kind of direct active manager of some of the activities in the PPP area. So hopefully that helps. You can reach out if you have more questions. I don't know if Scotty, you want to add anything on top of that?
No, I thought that's perfect. And I would just underscore the PIC. It's a great opportunity for Godwin or others who are interested in PPPs or any particular topic to get involved, to invite speakers, and create opportunities for your fellow students.
Victoria, any other questions?
I think we are good for questions. Someone asked earlier about whether this would be recorded, because they're probably gone now, they were heading to class. But this will be recorded if any of you found this information to be a lot all at once and you want to refer back to it. This should be up on our YouTube channel by the end of the day tomorrow, and you can kind of review. Is another question that just came through. Let's see. This came through on the chat. I'm interested in further understanding of monopolies and antitrust, particularly in the digital age. What are some of the opportunities within the center?
Okay, so great question, and one that I have a particular interest in. Couple things. Pinar Dogan teaches a course on antitrust considerations in the spring. It's a module, and it covers a lot of the issues in some detail, primarily from an economist perspective. The module that I teach with Dick Kavanaugh on corporate citizenship, about a half that course, we focus on various social media platforms and the questions of how they should be regulated or not. Obviously, part of that includes antitrust. I don't know if you followed the hearings in the spring where they had 5 of the major social media, or 4 of the major social media CEOs testify before Congress. I think Congress did a much better job of doing its homework and asking sophisticated questions than they did a year earlier when they talked with some of these same people. And there are some people within the center at the Mossavar Rahmani Center. We just brought in an individual named Dipayan Ghosh. Dipayan is a PhD in electrical engineering who is focused on these issues. He and I are writing some papers in this area now. And I would be happy to talk further about ways to get involved on those issues. I think Eric Salama, who's one of the senior fellows, is also looking at issues of data privacy in particular, as I mentioned earlier, and that may be a natural place to think about engaging as well. And again, back to the PIC, I think that helps set up a PIC. I know somebody asked the question, how do you get involved with PICs? And I think if you reach out through the mailbox, the center mailbox, Scott and Susan and Victoria and I will pick some of that up and kind of help work through that process. I did notice somebody asked earlier that our research assistantships all paid. And Scott, you may be the best person to answer that, but I believe the answer is yes. In fact, I think it's a requirement that we do that under Massachusetts state law. So I don't know if there's anything to add, Scott.
No, I would just say, yes, they are all paid, and it is a requirement under, I think, federal and state law.
Okay, Victoria, anything else?
I think last call, folks, if anyone has any other questions. I think we're good.
All right, last thing I just want to say is thanks to all of you for joining. Don't hesitate to reach out if you've got specific questions and you think about them later and decide you'd like to get some more information about the center. We're happy to help. I realize this is one of the most unusual times I've ever experienced. I thought the financial crisis that we experienced in 2007, 2008 was difficult, 2009. This is even more bizarre in many ways. And as Larry said in his introductory comments, I think the way to look at this is how do we create opportunities from this, and how do we use it to generate the best experience possible for all of you. And I hope you get a chance to enjoy the year. Again, thank you so much, and we will hopefully talk soon virtually and hopefully soon in person. Thank you very much.